You're here because you want to cut through the noise, get to the heart of the matter quickly, but thoroughly, and connect the dots in, surprising ways. You're after those aha moments that reframe how you see the world without feeling like you've just survived an information avalanche.
Totally understand that.
So let's jump right into something truly fundamental: to make world peace.
Wow, yeah. A goal that resonates, across cultures and throughout history, doesn't it?
It really does.
We have a fascinating collection of thoughts on this, actually, distilled into a document called World Peace, an AI and human outlook.
Okay.
It's a really interesting mix, drawing from philosophy, history, psychology, even looking at how artificial intelligence might approach the problem.
Right, AI too.
Well,
Interesting. Okay, so our mission today is to dig deep into what to make world peace really means.
Yeah.
We want to uncover its historical roots, the psychological forces that either drive us towards it or, pull us away.
The push and pull.
Exactly. The societal factors that play a role, and the potential impact of AI, both the good and, well, the maybe not so good.
Right, the double-edged sword there.
So let's start with the most basic question. When we say peace, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, yeah, often the first thing that jumps out is just, the absence of war, no active fighting.
Right. No fighting. That sounds straightforward enough.
Yeah, and that's sometimes called negative peace.
Yeah.
It's a starting point, of course, but it's a bit limited as a perspective.
Limited how?
Well, it's a view that's historically been quite common, especially in Western thinking, but it doesn't capture the whole picture.
Right. It's like saying your car's running perfectly just because it's not making any strange noises.
Haha, yeah, good analogy.
That's good, sure, but it doesn't tell you if it's actually efficient or, performing optimally.
Exactly. That's why the idea of positive peace is so important. People like Johann Galtung really expanded on this.
Okay. Positive peace, what does that involve?
He defined peace as a state built on things like economic development, strong and fair institutions, and a society where justice and cooperation are really the norm.
Ah, so it's about addressing the root causes.
Precisely. Tackling the underlying issues that actually lead to conflict in the first place, not just putting a lid on it.
Which really speaks to a desire for overall well-being, doesn't it? It's not just stopping bad things, but actively creating conditions for good things to flourish.
That's it, exactly. And it's interesting, this more holistic view isn't entirely new. There's this ancient understanding of peace.
Oh, yeah.
As being something earned, a result of right conduct and worthy effort.
Almost like peace is a byproduct of living well, both individually and collectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could put it that way.
Now, our sources also explore some really insightful philosophical ideas about this whole concept of well-being.
They do. The ancient Greek concept of eudaimonia is pretty key here.
Eudaimonia, that's like human flourishing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Flourishing. Thinkers like Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, they all grappled with what it means to live a good life.
So what were their takes?
Well, for Aristotle, it was about living virtuously, pursuing what's genuinely meaningful. Plato saw it more as an internal harmony, within the soul.
And Socrates.
He linked it strongly to knowledge and virtue. Knowing the good leads to doing the good.
So when we talk about to make world peace through this eudaimonia lens, it's more than just a political goal.
Much more.
It's almost like a shared human endeavor to achieve this highest good, this state of flourishing for everyone. Is that the core idea?
I think that captures it really well. And what's fascinating is when we look beyond just Western philosophies, the understanding of peace gets even richer, more diverse.
Ah, right. Table 1 in our source material touches on this.
It does, yeah. It gives a fascinating glimpse into this diversity.
Okay, like what? What stand out?
Well, for instance, in Eastern traditions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, you have Shanti.
Shanti.
Inner peace. Exactly, inner tranquility. And then there's Ahimsa, the principle of nonviolence, super central in those faiths.
So what's the key takeaway from those perspectives for world peace?
It really emphasizes the individual's internal state as foundational. Like maybe cultivating inner peace is a necessary step towards wider societal peace. Makes sense, doesn't it?
It does. Start within. And then we see indigenous cultures. Their view seems different again.
Very much so. Often there's this deep connection between peace and the natural world. It's a holistic well-being that includes harmony with nature, strong community bonds.
And this emphasis on caring and sharing.
Right. It highlights this deep interconnectedness. Peace isn't just a human thing separate from everything else. It's tied to our relationship with the environment, our whole social fabric.
Okay, and Islamic culture. Our source mentions salam.
Yes, salam. It's more than just a greeting, obviously. It's a concept of peace rooted in the divine, something you achieve through justice and compassion.
So a strong ethical and spiritual dimension there.
Definitely. And in many African cultures, peace is often primarily about communal harmony, the strength of relationships within the community, even with ancestors.
Wow, so many angles. And the Baha'i faith. They talk about a great peace.
They do. And interestingly, they see it as achievable either through our collective will, like we choose to build it, or perhaps after some kind of major global catastrophe forces our hand.
A bit sobering, that last part.
Oh.
But it puts a strong emphasis on human agency, doesn't it?
It really does. What's fascinating when you pull all these threads together is how the idea of peace itself seems to have evolved in human thought.
How so?
We've kind of moved from this narrow focus on just stopping wars, negative peace,
Right.
to this much broader understanding, something encompassing well-being, justice, harmony on multiple levels, inner, social, environmental.
So it's like a consistent human aspiration, just expressed in incredibly diverse ways across cultures.
That's a great way to put it.
So the key insight here seems to be, if we're serious about to make world peace, we absolutely have to appreciate these very different meanings. A one-size-fits-all approach just isn't going to cut it.
Precisely. What peace looks like and feels like, what it means, can vary enormously depending on the cultural context. Sensitivity is key.
Okay, got it. Let's dig it a bit deeper then. Our sources also explore the fundamental drives behind this pursuit of peace, even alongside our capacity for conflict. What does our evolutionary history tell us about this internal tug-of-war?
Well, from an evolutionary standpoint, it's interesting. Our capacity for cooperation and empathy actually makes a lot of sense for survival.
How so?
Think about early human communities. Like many social animals, they thrived through mutual support, right? Helping each other out.
Safety in numbers, sharing resources.
Exactly. This favored the development of what we might call moral emotions, especially empathy. Understanding and sharing feelings helped cooperation. So there seems to be a biological basis for peaceful coexistence, at least within our groups.
But there's always a but, isn't there? We also know humans are capable of, the opposite, aggression, violence.
Indeed. Our evolutionary history isn't all cooperation. It also includes aggression. Evolutionary psychology suggests aggression could have been adaptive for our ancestors, too.
Adaptive.
In what way? Competing for scarce resources, defending territory or kin, even establishing social status or attracting mates. Aggression had its uses, evolutionarily speaking.
So this duality, the capacity for both empathy and aggression, seems baked in, a core part of being human.
It certainly seems that way.
Okay, so if that's true, then to make world peace isn't about somehow eliminating aggression, which sounds, impossible.
Probably, yeah.
It's more about managing it,
Right.
leveraging our cooperative and empathetic instincts to build systems that favor peace over conflict. Is that a key insight?
I think that's exactly right. And thinkers across different fields have wrestled with this very tension. Well, you have Plato, who believed reason could guide our more primal instincts towards the good. David Hume, on the other hand, argued that our emotions, particularly empathy, he called it sympathy, are what really drive our morality.
Interesting contrast.
And then you have someone like Freud, who saw the human psyche as this constant battleground between different instincts, including aggressive drives.
So it's a consistent theme, this internal struggle or tension. Now, how have these ideas, this push and pull, actually played out in real-world efforts to achieve peace throughout history?
Oh, the historical record shows this long human quest for peace with lots of different approaches. You see early European attempts like the Peace of God and the Truce of God.
Who are those?
Efforts by the church, basically, to try to limit the constant warfare between feudal lords, protect non-combatants, establish periods where fighting was forbidden.
Ah, okay. Trying to put some rules on war.
Exactly. Then later, during the Reformation, you see the rise of pacifist groups, the so-called peace churches like the Quakers and Mennonites advocating nonviolence as a core principle.
And the Enlightenment. I imagine thinkers then had ideas.
Oh, definitely. You get rational arguments for peace. Thinkers like Rousseau or Kant with his famous essay on perpetual peace, proposing things like a federation of states to prevent war.
Right, Kant's idea. And moving closer to our time.
The 19th century saw the growth of more formal peace societies and international movements.
And then the 20th century, obviously marked by terrible wars, but also some powerful peace movement.
Absolutely. Despite the incredible violence, you get figures like Gandhi, whose philosophy of ahimsa, nonviolent resistance, Satyagraha had a massive global impact, inspiring leaders everywhere.
A huge influence.
And, of course, the creation of the United Nations after the World Wars. Its whole purpose, at least initially, was specifically to prevent future global conflicts on that scale, and anti-nuclear movements later on, too.
We've also seen attempts to establish what our sources call peace orders. What does that mean?
Think of large-scale systems designed to maintain stability over vast areas. The classic example is the Pax Romana.
The Roman peace.
Right. A long period of relative peace and stability across the Roman Empire. Now, it came with its own costs. Obviously, it was peace enforced by Roman legions.
Sure, peace through dominance.
Exactly. But it was a kind of order. Or think about the Peace of Westphalia in 1648.
That ended the 30 Years' War.
Yes, and it's hugely important because it basically established the principles of state sovereignty and territorial integrity that, underpin our modern international system. It changed how states interacted.
Okay. And then there are just countless peace treaties throughout history.
Billions of them, probably, from ancient Egypt right up to modern times, though, as we saw with something like the Treaty of Versailles after World War I.
Yeah, that didn't exactly guarantee lasting peace.
Yeah.
A cautionary tale.
Very much so. It arguably sowed the seeds for the next conflict.
Looking at all this history, it really feels like a learning curve, doesn't it? Maybe a slow and painful one, but still.
I think so. It seems that we started by just trying to limit the damage of war, put some rules around it, and have gradually, maybe haltingly, moved towards broader goals. Thinking about justice, preventing conflict from starting, addressing root causes.
But what's the key takeaway from this historical overview?
I'd say it's that humanity's approach to peace has definitely evolved. There's a growing, though maybe incomplete, understanding that simply ending wars isn't enough. We need to build more just, more stable, more equitable societies. Positive peace, again.
Which brings us back to AI. Our sources suggest AI could potentially accelerate this learning process. How might that work?
Well, imagine feeding AI vast amounts of historical data. Data on conflicts, peace agreements, economic conditions, social factors, political decisions, everything.
Okay.
AI could potentially sift through all that complexity and identify patterns, correlations, maybe even causal links that we humans, with our limitations, might miss or take centuries to figure out.
So it could help us learn more quickly what actually works and what doesn't in the real messy world of peace building.
That's the potential, yes.
Right.
Faster learning from our collective history.
That's a powerful idea. Now, the document we're examining argues that this whole drive to make world peace is actually a universal human aspiration. Can you unpack that a bit? Why universal?
Yeah, the argument is that despite all the diverse ways we define peace, or the different paths we take to pursue it.
Like we discussed earlier.
Exactly. The underlying desire for security, for well-being, for a life free from violence and fear seems to be a common thread running through all human societies.
And there's a biological basis for this, too.
Well, connecting back to evolution, we see this reflected in our neurobiology. We have brain systems linked to empathy, to cooperation, to pro-social behavior.
The cooperative side.
Right. But alongside that, we also have the biological underpinnings for aggression. It's that duality again. And crucially, how these tendencies actually manifest, which side comes out on top, so to speak, is heavily influenced by our environment. Gene-environment interactions are key.
Which connects back to that point you made earlier, the listener's mention of vitamins and nutrition almost. Basic needs have to be met first.
Absolutely. If people are constantly struggling for survival, if basic needs aren't met, the focus narrows dramatically. Competition for resources can intensify, making conflict more likely. The idea of broader positive peace can feel like a distant luxury.
Makes sense. Survival first.
And it's interesting, the source even suggests that fields like physics and math, which might seem totally unrelated,
Yeah, how do they fit in?
they actually provide us with tools and concepts. Think of complexity theory, chaos theory, game theory, that can help us model and understand the incredibly complex dynamics of peace and conflict systems.
Ah, okay. So they offer ways to think about these large interconnected systems where small changes can have big effects.
Exactly. It's about understanding the order of life in a broader, systemic sense.
So it's all interconnected in ways we might not immediately think of. What about our beliefs, our state of mind? How do they factor into this universal aspiration for peace?
They play an absolutely critical role. Think about hope. Study after study shows hope is a powerful psychological engine driving peace efforts, keeping people engaged even when things are tough.
Without hope, why bother?
Right. And then there's the belief in a just world. It's a common psychological tendency, but it can have paradoxical effects, sometimes leading people to blame victims to preserve their belief that the world is fundamentally fair.
That's complicated.
It is. And across nearly all religious and spiritual traditions, you find core teachings that promote peace, compassion, nonviolence, the interconnectedness of humanity. These belief systems shape billions of lives and are powerful forces.
It also seems like our individual understanding of peace develops as we grow up.
It does. Research shows children often understand peace in very concrete terms like not fighting. As we mature into adolescence and adulthood, our understanding often becomes more abstract, incorporating ideas of justice, rights, systemic issues.
So our individual journey mirrors humanity's collective journey in understanding peace.
In a way, yes. And that has real implications for how we approach peace education, making sure it's developmentally appropriate, that it resonates with people at different stages of life.
And ultimately, whether we achieve peace or fail to achieve it has these huge ripple effects, doesn't it?
Massive. It impacts everything. Individual mental health, family structures, societal stability, economic development, environmental sustainability, you name it. The pursuit of peace, or the lack of it, touches every aspect of human existence.
Which really underscores the need for a holistic approach.
Absolutely. And this sheer complexity, this web of interconnectedness, is another area where AI's ability to analyze vast, diverse data sets could be incredibly valuable, helping us see those connections, identify leverage points, and maybe develop more effective, systemic strategies for peace.
Okay. So we've looked at the big picture definitions, history, the fundamental human drives. Now let's really zoom in on the human experience itself, those psychological and societal forces that shape our journey towards peace.
Right. This is where it gets really fascinating, looking at the interplay between our individual minds, our psychology, and the broader social environment we live in.
Let's start with the individual level then. What are some of the ways our own thinking, our own mental habits can actually get in the way of peace efforts?
Oh, there are quite a few cognitive biases that can trip us up. Our sources mention several. For example, present bias.
Present bias.
Yeah, it's our tendency to prioritize immediate rewards or needs over future benefits. So we might focus on short-term gains even if they undermine long-term peace.
Okay, I can see that. What else?
The mere urgency effect. That's where we get caught up in tasks that feel urgent but aren't actually that important, distracting us from the long-term strategic work of peace building.
Like constantly putting out small fires instead of fireproofing the building.
Exactly. Then there's the planning fallacy, our tendency to underestimate the time, resources, and effort needed to achieve complex goals. This can lead to disillusionment when peace initiatives take longer or cost more than expected.
Setting ourselves up for disappointment.
Can happen. And complexity bias, sometimes we're drawn to overly complicated solutions, maybe overlooking simpler, more direct approaches that might actually be more effective.
So what's the key takeaway about these biases? It sounds like our brains have these built-in shortcuts or tendencies that, while useful sometimes, can seriously hinder us when dealing with something as big and long-term as peace.
That's a great summary. We need to be aware of them in ourselves and in our institutions.
Okay, beyond biases, what about emotions? How do they play in?
Hugely important. Being able to manage our own emotions constructively, especially anger, fear, or frustration in conflict situations, is absolutely vital for peaceful resolution. Emotional intelligence is key.
Emotional intelligence. That's self-awareness, managing emotions, empathy.
Exactly. Self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, including empathy and relationship management, all crucial for navigating disagreements peacefully.
Empathy keeps coming up as fundamental, doesn't it?
It really does. When we can understand and genuinely share, or at least appreciate, the feelings of others, it builds connection and makes conflict less likely or easier to resolve non-violently. It's a powerful social glue.
But is empathy always helpful?
That's a good question. It's complex. Sometimes our empathy can be stronger for people within our own group, our in-group. It doesn't always extend universally, and it can even be manipulated.
Okay. Now, we also talked about aggression earlier from an evolutionary perspective. How does that play out at the individual level psychologically?
Well, we know it has those evolutionary roots, and psychologically it can manifest in different ways. Researchers sometimes distinguish between proactive aggression,
Which is like planned instrumental aggression.
right, using aggression to get something, and reactive aggression, which is more impulsive, like lashing out when provoked or threatened.
And how much of this is hardwired?
Well, studies suggest aggression has a moderate genetic component, maybe around 50% heritability. But, and this is critical, its expression is massively influenced by the environment. Those gene-environment interactions again, especially early life experiences like exposure to violence or maltreatment.
So again, it's not just nature and nurture, it's the constant interplay between them. Very complex. What about our individual search for meaning? How does that connect to peace?
The pursuit of meaning, of eudaimonia, as we discussed, can be a really powerful force for peace. When individuals feel their life has purpose, when they're focused on contributing to something larger than themselves, living according to their values, that can naturally lead to behaviors that support cooperation and peaceful coexistence.
So a meaningful life is often a less conflict-prone life.
It often seems that way, yeah.
Yeah.
Less focused on purely selfish gain, perhaps.
Okay, but on the flip side, what about the darker aspects of human psychology? Things like cruelty, dehumanization. How do they impact the pursuit of peace?
These are absolutely critical factors in understanding how extreme violence becomes possible. Dehumanization is a key mechanism.
Seeing others as less than human.
Exactly. When you strip away someone's humanity in your mind, it becomes psychologically much easier to justify harming them, even committing atrocities. This is often fueled by rhetoric and propaganda, calling people vermin or cockroaches.
Chilling.
It is. And related phenomena like enemy imaging, creating a distorted negative stereotype of the other, projection, de-individuation in crowds, they all play a role. The human mind can unfortunately be a battleground for these competing impulses.
Yeah.
Empathy versus dehumanization.
So what's a key insight here? It seems that even horrific violence can be perceived as morally justified by those committing it. That really complicates simple good versus evil narratives, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It means peacebuilding can't just focus on changing behaviors. It has to address the underlying beliefs, the moral justifications, the psychological processes that enable violence. It's much deeper work.
Okay, so that's the individual level. Biases, emotions, aggression, meaning, dehumanization. A lot going on inside our heads. What happens when we scale up and look at the bigger picture, the societal forces influencing peace and conflict?
Right, moving to the societal level, social cohesion is a really crucial concept here.
Social cohesion, meaning how well a society hangs together.
Basically, yes. The bonds, the trust, the shared values, the sense of interdependence that hold a society together. Societies with strong social cohesion tend to be more stable, more resilient, and experience less internal conflict.
And conflict itself must damage that cohesion.
Hugely. It erodes trust, deepens divisions, breaks down those social bonds. Rebuilding cohesion after conflict is a major challenge.
And what about a society's belief in its ability to act together, that sense of collective efficacy you mentioned earlier?
Also really important. When people in a community believe they can work together effectively to achieve common goals, whether it's improving schools or reducing crime, that belief itself is linked to lower levels of violence and greater stability.
So belief matters. Now, inequality is often cited as a driver of conflict. Is that supported here?
Yes, very strongly. Particularly what's called horizontal inequality.
Horizontal, as opposed to vertical.
Exactly. Vertical inequality is between rich and poor individuals. Horizontal inequality is inequality between different identity groups, ethnic, religious, regional groups. When one group feels systematically disadvantaged compared to others, that's a potent source of grievance and instability.
Especially if things change suddenly. Like one group gains power and resources at another's expense.
Precisely. Sudden shifts or perceptions of unfairness can really destabilize things, and unfortunately, leaders can sometimes deliberately exploit these existing group grievances and inequalities to mobilize people for political gain, sometimes violently.
Power dynamics seem central too.
Absolutely. Imbalances of power, whether in local communities, within nations, or in international relations, are frequent drivers or complicating factors in conflict. And then there's the whole issue of natural resources.
Right, we touched on this. They can be both a blessing and a curse, potentially.
Exactly that. Competition over scarce resources like water, fertile land, minerals, that's a classic driver of conflict throughout history.
It's a scarcity problem.
Yes. But perhaps surprisingly, sometimes an abundance of resources can also fuel conflict. The resource curse.
How does that work?
If a country has valuable resources like oil or diamonds, but weak governance, corruption, and inequality, that resource wealth can actually end up funding conflict, exacerbating divisions, and making the state less accountable to its citizens.
So fair and sustainable management of resources is vital for peace.
Absolutely critical. Equitable sharing of benefits, transparent management, environmental protection, all key elements for peace building.
So what's a key takeaway here about society? It really sounds like good governance, accountable, capable, fair institutions is a kind of linchpin holding things together and preventing conflict.
I think that's right. Governance structures are pivotal. When people feel excluded, when institutions aren't responsive or seen as legitimate, when there's impunity, grievances fester and the risk of violence increases dramatically.
So you can almost see a causal chain.
Mm-hmm.
Horizontal inequality erodes social cohesion and trust.
Mm-hmm.
Combine that with grievances over resources or power imbalances and maybe weak or biased governance.
And you have a recipe for potential conflict. The pieces fit together in a dangerous way.
And resources remain this paradoxical element essential for life, but potential conflict drivers if not managed well.
Exactly. Sustainable, transparent, equitable management underpinned by good governance, that's the ideal for turning resources into a foundation for peace, not conflict.
Okay, now let's talk about the very real human impact of conflict,
Yeah.
especially on those who are often most vulnerable.
Yes, this is crucial. Conflict has devastating and often long-lasting effects, and these impacts aren't felt equally. Vulnerable populations, particularly women and children, often bear the heaviest burden, and it profoundly disrupts family structures.
We know, often anecdotally, that women and girls suffer disproportionately during conflict violence displacement. Has this aspect been historically overlooked in peace processes?
For a long time, yes, largely overlooked or minimized. But there's been increasing recognition, formally marked by things like UN Security Council Resolution 1325 back in 2000, which stressed the importance of women's participation in peace building.
Does conflict ever change gender roles for the better?
Sometimes you see temporary shifts, where women take on new roles out of necessity. But these changes rarely translate into lasting empowerment after the conflict ends. Often traditional roles reassert themselves, sometimes even more rigidly.
Yet women are often involved in peace building.
Absolutely, especially at the grassroots level. They play crucial roles, often focusing on those practical aspects of positive peace, reconciliation, rebuilding community ties, addressing basic needs, things essential for long-term stability.
And does their involvement make a difference in formal peace processes?
Research strongly suggests it does. Peace agreements are significantly more likely to last when women have been meaningfully involved in negotiating and shaping them.
That's a powerful finding. And the impact on children is hard to even fathom.
It truly is devastating. Children in conflict zones face unimaginable trauma from witnessing violence, experiencing loss, displacement, separation from family. Essential services like healthcare and education collapse. Malnutrition skyrockets, leading to long-term developmental problems and even death.
And the psychological toll.
Profound and long-lasting. Higher rates of PTSD, depression, anxiety. This trauma can hinder cognitive development, emotional regulation, social skills. And tragically, it can even be passed down, creating intergenerational cycles of trauma and violence.
Plus the loss of education, the horror of child soldiers.
All of it. And remember how we talked about understanding peace developing over time? Conflict drastically shapes children's understanding of the world, of trust, of violence, of peace itself. This has huge implications for their future and for future peace. Peace education becomes incredibly important.
And families. The core social unit, how are they affected?
They're often shattered. Death, injury, separation, displacement. These tear families apart and put immense strain on relationships. New, often more vulnerable family structures emerge, like households headed by widows or even children.
And the psychological trauma affects family dynamics too, presumably.
Absolutely. Parents suffering from PTSD may struggle to provide stable care. Stress levels are incredibly high. This can lead to increased domestic violence, marital breakdown, difficulties parenting. Even military families who aren't directly in a full-scale war zone experience significant stressors, deployment, separation, risk, which can contribute to mental health issues, substance abuse, and family problems.
So what's a key insight here? It seems like while these vulnerable groups, women, children, disrupted families, suffer disproportionately, they aren't just victims. They also possess unique strengths, resilience, and insights that are vital for building lasting peace.
That's exactly right. It's a crucial point. Peace building must involve both protecting vulnerable groups and empowering them, recognizing their agency and their essential contributions.
And if the trauma and disruption aren't addressed?
Then they risk perpetuating cycles of violence into the next generation. Trauma can beget trauma.
But conversely?
Conversely, healing, support, rebuilding stable family and community environments, these can foster intergenerational peace. It shows how children's formative experiences are this long-term investment. Addressing their needs is investing in a more peaceful future.
Okay, so in the face of such immense suffering and injustice, how do people cope? What are the reactions, the mechanisms?
Humans react in a really wide spectrum of ways. There's no single response. People employ various coping mechanisms.
Like what?
Things like seeking social support from family, friends, community, taking problem-focused actions, trying to change the situation, using humor sometimes, finding strength in religious or spiritual beliefs, strengthening bonds with their own group in-group solidarity. The list goes on.
And some strategies work better than others, presumably.
Definitely. And the choice of strategy and its effectiveness varies hugely based on the individual, the context, the culture, the resources available.
And despite unimaginable hardships, we often see incredible resilience.
Absolutely. Resilience, that capacity to adapt positively to adversity, it's remarkable.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily something innate you either have or don't. It can be fostered through things like psychosocial support programs, community-based peace-building efforts that focus on restoring well-being, agency, hope, and social connections.
And it keeps coming up again.
It's vital. Hope acts as a crucial motivator, sustaining people through difficult times and fueling efforts for change. Things like futures thinking, actively envisioning a better future, can cultivate hope.
Which naturally leads into activism, right? That proactive response driven by hope and a sense of injustice.
Exactly. Activism is a powerful, constructive response.
Mm.
But there are also psychological challenges that can lead in the other direction towards cynicism, indifference, or even destructive responses.
Such as?
Well, we mentioned the belief in a just world potentially leading to victim blaming. There's also compassion fatigue.
Burnout from exposure to suffering.
Yes, that emotional and physical exhaustion from constantly dealing with trauma and suffering. It can lead to numbness, cynicism, withdrawal. Health workers, aid workers, journalists, activists, they're particularly vulnerable.
Activist burnout is a real thing, too.
Definitely. The sheer demands, the slow pace of change, the setbacks, it can take a heavy toll. And even humor, while sometimes a coping mechanism, is complex. It can be misinterpreted, seen as insensitive, or even used aggressively. It's very subjective.
So what's a key insight about these diverse reactions to suffering?
It's that people respond in incredibly varied ways. Effective peace building needs to acknowledge this diversity. It can't assume everyone's starting from the same place psychologically. The aim should be to gently nudge responses towards constructive engagement and hope while actively mitigating cynicism, burnout, and those destructive moral justifications for violence we talked about. It needs nuance. Precisely. It requires understanding the human dimension in all its complexity.
Okay. This human dimension of to make world peace is clearly incredibly layered and complex. Now let's pivot and look through a different lens, the perspective of artificial intelligence. How does AI even begin to approach something as nuanced and human as peace?
Well, it's obviously a very different approach. AI isn't human. It doesn't feel peace. But it can be a powerful partner in understanding and potentially addressing the challenges involved. It offers a data-driven lens.
How does AI interpret or measure peace differently from traditional methods?
One really interesting area is using AI for linguistic analysis on a massive scale.
Analyzing language, how does that relate to peace?
AI can process huge volumes of text, like news articles, social media, speeches from different places and times. It can then identify subtle patterns in language use that might distinguish more peaceful societies from less peaceful ones.
Patterns? Like what kind of patterns?
Things like the topics people focus on. For example, AI research has suggested that in more peaceful societies, public discourse, like in news, might focus more on everyday life, community events, arts, culture, creation.
More living than just surviving.
Exactly. Compared to less peaceful places where the focus might be more on government control, conflict, security threats. Also things like linguistic diversity, the complexity of language used, the emotional tone expressed AI can quantify these things.
That's a completely different way of looking at it than just counting battles or casualties.
It really is. It suggests that peace might be reflected not just in the absence of big negative events, but in the texture of everyday life, the small stuff, how people communicate and what they value. This has even led to AI-generated peace indices trying to track these subtle shifts in near real time.
So what's a key insight here from AI's linguistic view?
Perhaps that piece isn't just about high-level politics or stopping violence. It's deeply embedded in the ordinary fabric of life, in how people relate and express themselves. Living rather than just surviving, creating rather than just controlling.
Yes, exactly. AI is also being used in research trying to understand human values, analyzing how AI models themselves respond to moral dilemmas, trying to align AI with what humans deem important. And to make world peace is obviously deeply value-laden.
Right.
And there are applications in advancing the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, including SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions, using AI for things like fraud detection, improving transparency, maybe even access to justice.
So AI offers this data-rich pattern-spotting perspective on peace.
That's a good way to put it. Now, related to that is AI's analytical capabilities when it comes to understanding conflict itself.
Right. We hear a lot about AI being used to predict conflicts. How realistic is that? Well, AI algorithms can analyze vast amounts of historical and real-time data, political instability indicators, economic data, social media sentiment, troop movements, satellite imagery.
A huge amount of data.
And identify patterns that often precede the outbreak of violence. There have been systems developed, some with reported successes in forecasting certain types of events or escalations.
But it's not a crystal ball, right?
Definitely not. Predicting complex human behavior, especially surprise events or decisions driven by irrationality and miscalculation, remains incredibly difficult. AI is a tool for analysis, not perfect prophecy.
Okay, so prediction is one aspect. What about using AI to help us figure out how to build peace more effectively? Can it help with strategy?
Potentially, yes. AI can be used to create complex simulations, virtual environments where you can test different peace-building strategies.
Like wargaming, but for peace.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
You could simulate the effects of different negotiation tactics, different types of interventions, different resource allocation plans, and see what the likely outcomes might be according to the model.
That could be useful for planning.
And AI can also help analyze data to get a deeper understanding of the specific root causes driving a particular conflict. Is it primarily poverty, ethnic tensions, political exclusion, resource scarcity, corruption? AI can help disentangle those factors.
I've also heard about applying theories like complexity theory or dynamical systems theory to peace and conflict. How does AI fit with those?
Those theories view conflict and peace not as simple cause and effect chains, but as complex systems with emergent properties, feedback loops, tipping points.
Like ecosystems or weather systems.
Exactly. Peace might be seen as a kind of stable, self-organizing state, conflict as another state. AI, especially machine learning, is really good at modeling these kinds of complex, nonlinear systems. It can help identify those hidden dynamics, those leverage points, where a small intervention might shift the whole system towards a more peaceful state.
So what's a key capability AI brings here? Sounds like AI helps us operationalize these complex theories, moving them from abstract ideas to tools we can use to analyze real-world situations and maybe find non-obvious solutions.
Precisely. It helps us grapple with the inherent complexity, rather than oversimplifying.
But there's a catch, isn't there? Even if AI gives us a perfect warning or a brilliant strategy,
it doesn't automatically mean action will be taken. That's the crucial warning-response gap. Getting the analysis right is only half the battle. You still need the political will, the resources, the diplomatic effort to translate those insights into effective preventive action or peace building on the ground.
So the technology is powerful for analysis, but it's only as effective as our human systems for responding to that analysis.
Exactly right. Integrating AI insights into political and diplomatic workflows, building trust in the systems, and crucially, cultivating the political will, that's the challenge.
Okay, so AI can help us understand conflict better, maybe even simulate peace building. How can it directly contribute to actually creating more peaceful conditions, to fostering that positive peace and human flourishing?
Right. Moving from analysis to active contribution, there are several promising avenues. One is in mental health support.
How can AI help with that?
AI-powered chatbots and digital therapy tools are being developed and deployed, sometimes specifically aimed at providing accessible, scalable mental health support and trauma counseling in conflict-affected areas where trained human therapists are scarce.
That could reach a lot of people. Are there downsides?
Definite limitations.
Yeah.
Lack of genuine human empathy, privacy concerns, potential for bias in the algorithms, risk of dependency. It's seen as a supplement, not a replacement for human care where available.
Makes sense. What else?
Augmenting human decision-making and governance. AI can analyze complex data to help leaders make more informed decisions, optimize resource allocation, identify inefficiencies, maybe even help debias decision processes. Though ethical governance of the AI itself is key there.
Using data for better policy and resource management.
Yes, we touched on resource conflicts. AI can play a role in optimizing the allocation of scarce resources like water or food aid, using predictive modeling for crop yields or water availability, designing smarter infrastructure. This can help prevent resource-related conflicts and support post-conflict recovery.
And what about the information space? Disinformation is such a huge problem now.
It is. AI is being used extensively to detect and flag harmful content, disinformation, hate speech, propaganda on social media and other platforms. This is crucial for protecting the integrity of peace operations, countering incitement, and safeguarding democratic processes. It's an ongoing arms race, though, as AI is also used to create disinformation.
The double-edged sword again. Can AI help in actual negotiations?
Potentially. AI tools can offer real-time translation, analyze negotiation transcripts to identify patterns or sticking points, perhaps even suggest areas of common ground based on the parties' stated positions. There are even platforms exploring AI-assisted deliberation to help groups find consensus.
Facilitating dialogue.
Yes.
And promoting good governance more broadly.
Yes, particularly in tackling corruption. AI can analyze vast amounts of financial data, procurement records, government spending patterns to detect anomalies, inconsistencies, and potential fraud far more efficiently than humans alone. There are examples of this being used in various countries already.
So what's the key element for effectively using AI in all these areas? Really sounds like the sweet spot is partnership.
Absolutely. The most effective applications seem to be where AI handles the heavy lifting of data processing, pattern recognition, prediction, while humans provide the judgment, the empathy, the ethical oversight, the cultural understanding, the strategic direction, augmentation, not replacement.
Okay. Now, the document we're looking at also touches on something deeper, how the very development of AI prompts us to think about some really fundamental, even existential questions about ourselves. How does to make world peace fit into this larger philosophical picture?
It's a fascinating point. The argument is that developing AI, especially as we contemplate more advanced forms like artificial general intelligence, forces us to reflect deeply on our own nature, our purpose, our values, our future as a species. And this reflection can actually elevate the importance of achieving global peace and cooperation.
How so? Why does thinking about AI make peace seem more important?
Well, for one, AI can act as a kind of mirror. It can process and analyze the vast corpus of human thought on profound questions, life, death, meaning, consciousness, across cultures and history.
The listener specifically asked about life and death. What perspective can AI really bring there?
AI can't give us definitive metaphysical answers, obviously. But by analyzing how humans have grappled with mortality, the value placed on life, the narratives around death, it can synthesize these diverse perspectives. It might help us clarify the questions, see common threads, perhaps reinforcing the preciousness of conscious existence and the urgency of preserving it, which implies peace.
So it reflects our own thoughts back to us, maybe in a more organized way.
Exactly. And the very possibility of AGI or superintelligence forces us to ponder consciousness itself, the limits of human understanding. AI might offer new metaphors or frameworks for thinking about these things.
And there's the risk element too, right? Existential risk from AI.
Yes. The possibility, however remote some think it is, that advanced AI could pose existential risks to humanity underscores the profound value of human survival. This, in turn, highlights the critical need for global peace and cooperation to navigate these future challenges safely, to ensure AI develops in ways aligned with human flourishing, the alignment problem. If we're fighting each other, we're less likely to manage AI well.
So the AI challenge itself could be a unifying force, demanding global cooperation.
It could or should act as one. And even on an individual level, AI tools like sophisticated chatbots might stimulate personal reflection on beliefs, values, purpose, connecting back to that idea of eudaimonia and potentially reinforcing pro-social values.
But what's important to keep in mind here, we shouldn't expect AI to give us the meaning of life.
Definitely not. It's crucial to manage expectations. AI's insights are ultimately based on analyzing human-generated data and perspectives. It's anthropocentric by nature. It can't offer truly novel, non-human wisdom on existence. Its value is in augmenting human reflection, not providing definitive answers from outside.
So AI is a tool for introspection, prompting us to think more deeply about what matters, and perhaps realizing that peace is fundamental to navigating the future whatever it holds.
That seems to be the core idea, yes.
Okay. Now, we've talked a lot about the potential benefits and analytical power of AI. But we absolutely need to confront the ethical side. Using AI for something as high stakes as building peace must come with significant ethical considerations.
Absolutely critical. The integration of AI into efforts to make world peace is fraught with ethical challenges that require extremely careful navigation. We ignore them at our peril.
What are some of the key ethical challenges we really need to be aware of?
Bias is a huge one. AI systems learn from data, and if that data reflects existing societal biases, racial, gender, economic, whatever the AI can inherit and even amplify those biases.
Leading to unfair outcomes.
Exactly. Unfair outcomes in things like conflict prediction, resource allocation, even facial recognition used for security. This could actually deepen divisions and undermine peace efforts.
Okay, bias is major. What else?
Accountability and transparency. The black box problem, sometimes even the creators don't fully understand how an AI reaches a particular decision. This makes accountability incredibly difficult. Who is responsible if an AI makes a harmful mistake? We need transparency and what's called meaningful human control, especially in critical applications.
Like autonomous weapons.
That's the most stark example, yes. But even in less lethal applications, knowing how decisions are made is crucial for trust and accountability.
Those are critical points. What other ethical flags are raised?
The environmental costs. Training large AI models requires immense computing power, which consumes huge amounts of energy and water. There are also human rights concerns related to sourcing the raw materials needed for the hardware, a kind of peace paradox if the tools for peace cause harm elsewhere.
Hadn't thought of the environmental angle as much.
Significant.
Then there's data extraction and exploitation. AI is trained on vast data sets, often gathered without full informed consent or fair compensation, particularly from vulnerable populations or the Global South. Even the data labeling process can involve exploitative labor practices.
Data justice issues.
Yes, and surveillance and privacy. AI's power for monitoring communications, movement, behavior raises huge concerns about mass surveillance and potential misuse by authoritarian regimes, or even corporations, stifling dissent and eroding freedoms essential for peace.
And the flip side of AI detecting misinformation
is AI being used to create it. Weaponized AI generating deepfakes, realistic propaganda, personalized manipulation campaigns at unprecedented scale and speed. This can destabilize societies, incite violence, and severely endanger peace operations and democratic processes.
A huge threat. And the existential risks we mentioned.
That's the long-term concern, yes. Ensuring that highly capable future AI systems are aligned with human values and remain beneficial. The alignment problem.
Wow, it's a minefield. And even over-reliance.
Yeah.
Yeah, the potential for de-skilling. If we become too dependent on AI for analysis and decision-making, our own critical thinking, ethical reasoning, and peace-building skills could atrophy.
So what's the overarching ethical consideration here? It sounds like even well-intentioned AI applications could inadvertently undermine peace if their development and deployment aren't ethically self-aware and carefully governed.
That's exactly it. Good intentions aren't enough. We need robust ethical frameworks, ongoing critical assessment, and broad public deliberation.
And this needs global cooperation, right? AI doesn't respect borders.
Absolutely essential. The impacts are transboundary. We need international cooperation to establish shared ethical norms, standards, and mechanisms for oversight and governance. It's a global challenge requiring global solutions.
Okay, so as we try to navigate this, what kind of ethical framework should guide our efforts to make world peace, especially now with AI in the mix? Do our old frameworks still apply?
That's a key question. We likely need to re-examine and potentially adapt our historical ethical frameworks in light of AI's unique capabilities and challenges.
So where do we start? What's foundational?
Well, the principle of positive peace itself, that comprehensive understanding of peace involving justice, well-being, and human flourishing, should probably be a foundational value guiding AI development and deployment in this space. Alignment with that goal.
Makes sense. What about frameworks dealing with war, like just war theory?
Just war theory provides criteria for when resorting to war might be justified, just ad bellum, and how war should be conducted, just in bello. AI raises new, complex questions for nearly all its criteria.
Like?
Legitimate authority, can an AI decide to use force? Right intention? How do we assess an algorithm's intention? Proportionality and discrimination. Can autonomous weapons truly distinguish combatants from civilians reliably and make proportional judgments in complex dynamic situations? It challenges the very basis of the theory. Plus, just war theory itself has always faced critiques about its consistency and application.
Okay, so just war is complicated by AI. What about the responsibility to protect, R2P?
R2P asserts a collective international responsibility to intervene, potentially with force, to prevent mass atrocities. AI's predictive capabilities could theoretically inform R2P decisions' early warning. But relying on AI predictions also introduces risks of error, bias, or manipulation influencing decisions about intervention.
And R2P itself is ethically complex.
Highly complex. Issues around selectivity, motives for intervention, proving intervention actually helps, potential harm caused by intervention, mission creep. AI adds another layer of complexity and potential pitfalls to an already fraught doctrine.
What about pacifism, like Gandhi's ahimsa?
AI has a really complex relationship with pacifism. On one hand, AI tools could potentially enhance nonviolent conflict resolution, communication, understanding, supporting pacifist goals. On the other hand, AI's role in developing more efficient or autonomous weapon systems directly challenges core pacifist principles.
Attention there.
Yeah.
And transitional justice after conflict, dealing with past abuses.
AI could potentially assist in gathering evidence, identifying patterns of abuse, maybe even identifying perpetrators, aiding retributive justice. But again, risks of bias, inaccuracy, lack of transparency could deepen mistrust, hinder reconciliation efforts, and feel like an imposed, impersonal form of justice. There's often an ethical tension between retribution and reconciliation, and AI could exacerbate that.
It seems like AI forces us to reevaluate the core concepts in all these frameworks.
I think it does. We need to integrate AI ethics explicitly into broader deliberations about the ethics of peace building and intervention, ensuring alignment with fundamental principles like justice, inclusivity, local ownership, and human dignity. What's the core task here?
It's ensuring that our ethical reasoning keeps pace with the technology, constantly asking how AI impacts our core values and principles related to peace and conflict.
Precisely. It demands ongoing ethical reflection and adaptation.
So, given all this complexity, the human drives, the societal factors, the AI potential, the ethical minefields, what are our fundamental moral responsibilities here?
Yeah.
Both as humans and how we approach AI when it comes to make world peace.
At its heart, the drive to make world peace can be seen as a profound moral imperative. It's rooted in diverse philosophical and religious traditions that emphasize the inherent value of human life, our interconnectedness, and our capacity for empathy and compassion. Facing global challenges like climate change, pandemics, and potentially disruptive AI makes this imperative feel even more urgent.
So there's a fundamental human moral obligation.
Many would argue yes. Principles like the Golden Rule, Kant's categorical imperative, concepts of universal human rights, they all point towards a moral duty to prevent suffering, promote justice, and strive for that positive peace we've discussed. Global ethics frameworks try to articulate this.
And what about AI's responsibilities in this?
This is crucial. AI itself doesn't have genuine moral agency or consciousness, at least not currently. When we talk about AI's responsibilities, we're really talking about the ethical principles and constraints that we humans embed within its design and operation. The moral responsibility lies squarely with the humans who develop, deploy, and govern AI systems.
So we can't blame the algorithm. Accountability stays with us.
Absolutely. Accountability lies with humans, designers, deployers, policymakers, users. AI is a tool, a powerful one, but ultimately reflects the values and choices of its creators and users.
So what's the key takeaway about responsibility here?
It's shared but fundamentally human. Achieving a peaceful future requires collective human effort, individual choices, community action, national policies, international cooperation. AI can be a powerful partner in this effort, but it must be guided by human ethics and remain accountable to human oversight. The moral compass must remain firmly in human hands.
And AI can potentially help us act more morally.
Yes, that's the hope. By providing better information, highlighting consequences, enhancing empathy through connection, helping mitigate injustice or bias, AI could potentially facilitate and scale more ethical human behavior in the pursuit of peace, empowering us to act on our moral commitments more effectively.
Okay. So bring this all towards practical action. Given the imperative, the complexities, the potential of AI, what are some concrete, practical strategies we can actually pursue to make tangible progress towards make world peace in this complex age?
It definitely requires a multi-pronged approach. Several key strategic pillars stand out from the sources. First, and maybe most foundational, is investing in education.
Education for peace.
Yes, comprehensive education for peace, empathy, and global citizenship. This isn't just about teaching conflict resolution skills, though that's part of it. It's about cultivating critical thinking, understanding human rights, fostering intercultural respect, promoting empathy, and nurturing a sense of shared responsibility for the planet. It needs to be developmentally appropriate starting early.
And AI could help deliver that education more widely.
Potentially, yes. Personalized learning platforms, tools for cross-cultural dialogue and understanding. But the ethical considerations around curriculum, values, avoiding indoctrination are huge here too.
Okay, education is fundamental. What else is critical on a systemic level?
Strengthening governance, justice institutions, and international cooperation is absolutely vital. This includes practical things like security sector reform, SSR.
Improving police and military accountability.
Exactly. Making security forces more effective, but also more accountable to democratic control and human rights standards. Also, disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration DDR programs for ex-combatants in post-conflict settings are crucial for stability.
And managing resources.
Sustainable natural resource management, NRM, as we discussed. Ensuring equitable access, transparent revenue sharing, environmental protection. Even things like environmental diplomacy, cooperating across borders on shared environmental challenges, can build trust. AI can support monitoring and optimization here.
What about resolving conflicts politically?
Essential. Strengthening political mechanisms like preventive diplomacy, supporting mediation efforts like the UN does, facilitating dialogue channels, including informal Track 2 dialogues. Different international relations theories might suggest different approaches here, but the need for robust diplomatic tools is constant. AI might support this through data analysis and modeling, as we mentioned.
We also discussed the importance of meeting basic human needs alongside peace efforts.
Yeah.
How does that translate into practical strategy?
That's the idea behind the humanitarian development piece, HDP Nexus. It means moving away from siloed approaches. Humanitarian aid, long-term development work, and peace-building initiatives need to be integrated and coordinated from the very beginning of a crisis response.
So they reinforce each other.
Ideally, yes. Focusing on collective outcomes, ensuring local leadership, doing joint analysis of the situation, and coordinating programming across the different sectors. It's about addressing immediate needs while tackling root causes and building foundations for lasting peace simultaneously.
And we can't forget the psychological dimension of hope and belief.
Absolutely crucial. Strategies need to actively foster collective efficacy, that shared belief that we can do this. Showing evidence of progress, celebrating small wins, promoting collaboration helps build that belief. And actively cultivating hope and encouraging futures thinking, envisioning a desirable, peaceful future is essential to sustain engagement and prevent cynicism and burnout.
And finally, incentives. Can we structure things to encourage peace?
Thinking about effective incentive structures is important. How do you design peace processes or institutions so that cooperation, compromise, and adherence to agreements are genuinely rewarded for all parties over the long term? It's complex. You can't just apply corporate models like long-term incentive plans directly, but the principle of aligning incentives with desired long-term outcomes is relevant.
So what's the overarching strategic approach that emerges?
It really has to be multifaceted, holistic, and systemic. Addressing root causes like inequality and poor governance, investing in human capacities like education and empathy, leveraging technology like AI wisely and ethically, bridging the gap between immediate needs and long-term peace, and actively fostering hope and collective belief in the possibility of change. Precisely. It's a long-term, complex endeavor requiring sustained commitment on many fronts.
So to try and bring this incredibly rich discussion together, to make world peace remains this enduring, deeply human aspiration. It's clearly multifaceted, encompassing far more than just the absence of violence. It's about the presence of justice, equity, well-being, human flourishing.
Exactly. And as we navigate this complex pursuit in the 21st century, artificial intelligence emerges as this powerful dual-edged factor. It offers incredible potential new ways to understand peace linguistically, predict conflicts, simulate strategies, support well-being, counter disinformation, facilitate dialogue, promote good governance. But it also poses profound ethical challenges: bias, accountability, environmental costs, data exploitation, surveillance, misinformation, potential existential risks, the alignment problem. These are not trivial concerns. They require constant vigilance and careful management.
So the path forward isn't about choosing between humans and AI, is it? It sounds much more like needing to forge a careful, well-governed partnership.
I think that's exactly right. A partnership where human wisdom, ethics, empathy, and values firmly guide the application of AI's analytical power. AI should augment human capabilities for peace building, enhance our judgment, extend our reach, but not replace the core human elements. Ethical governance is paramount.
And we need those holistic, systemic approaches we talked about, like the HDP nexus, connecting the dots, plus investing deeply in human capacities, peace education, fostering hope and resilience, critical thinking. It's a continuous learning process.
Absolutely. And we have to acknowledge the challenge of present bias, the constant pull towards focusing only on immediate crises. It's vital to address those basic needs, the vitamins and nutrition, but we must simultaneously lift our gaze and work towards that broader vision of collective flourishing, of positive peace.
It's a monumental task, certainly. Feels daunting, but also incredibly important, maybe more urgent than ever.
It does.
Which brings us to a final thought. Perhaps the very act of developing artificial intelligence, by forcing us, as you said, to confront these fundamental questions about our existence, our values, our shared future, perhaps that can inadvertently serve as a catalyst.
A catalyst for what?
A catalyst for finally prioritizing global peace and cooperation, not just as a nice ideal, but as an essential condition for navigating the complex, uncharted territory ahead, especially territory we might share with increasingly intelligent machines. It forces the question, what kind of world do we actually want to build, not just for ourselves, but for whatever or whoever comes next?
That's a really provocative thought to end on. What kind of world do we want for ourselves and for the intelligence we're creating? A question definitely worth pondering.
This is DigitView.